They say blood is thicker than water, that family will always protect you, that parents would never harm their own children. I used to believe that too, until the night of my graduation dinner, when I watched my mother slip something white and powdery into my champagne glass. My name is Riley Chen. I'm 23 years old, and I just earned my degree in marine biology from Northwestern University. It should have been the proudest moment of my life. 4 years of late nights in the lab, of diving into cold water to collect samples, of fighting to prove I was more than just the disappointment daughter. My parents spared nothing for the celebration. They rented the entire top floor of a luxury hotel overlooking the bay, where city lights danced on dark water like scattered diamonds. String quartets played, waiters in white gloves circulated with silver trays. Everything gleamed with wealth and perfection. It was the kind of party that makes people whisper about how lucky you are, how blessed to have such devoted parents. But I knew better. Just 3 weeks earlier, they'd called me worthless, a failure who'd chosen the wrong path, the daughter who would never amount to anything because I refused to follow their plan. And now, surrounded by crystal and candlelight and the forced smiles of Chicago's elite, I watched my mother's hand tilt ever so slightly over my drink. The powder dissolved almost instantly. Most people would have missed it. A blink and it was gone. But I saw everything. My blood turned to ice in my veins. My heart was hammering so hard that I thought everyone must hear it. But I kept my face perfectly still, my smile frozen in place like a mask I'd learned to wear since childhood. They'd planned this. My own mother, the woman who gave birth to me, was trying to poison me in front of a room full of witnesses. I couldn't scream. I couldn't run. I couldn't let anyone know what I'd just seen. So I picked up the glass with steady hands and waited. The room buzzed with conversation. Guests clinked glasses and laughed at jokes I couldn't hear through the roaring in my ears. My father stood at the far end of the room, his eyes tracking me like a predator watching prey. Then I did something that surprised even myself. I turned to my younger sister Madison, the golden child, the daughter my parents actually loved. She stood beside me in a designer dress, her face glowing with genuine happiness for my achievement. "Maddie," I said softly, warmth dripping from every word. "You've supported me through everything. You deserve to share this moment with me." And I handed her my glass. The entire room seemed to tilt to one side. Time stretched like taffy. Madison's face lit up with emotion. "Riley, that's so sweet," she whispered, tears shimmering in her eyes. She raised the glass to her lips and drank. Deeply, I grabbed her glass instead, the one that hadn't been touched, and lifted it in a toast that felt like a declaration of war. Across the room, I watched the color drain from my mother's face. My father's hand froze halfway to his mouth, his expression turning to stone. They couldn't say anything, not in front of senators and business partners and society reporters with cameras, ready to capture every moment of this perfect family celebration. The trap they'd set had just snapped shut on someone else. Before you judge me for what I did, before you wonder how I could put my own sister at risk, you need to understand how I got here. You need to know what this family really is behind the magazine covers and charity galas. Let me take you back. I grew up in what everyone called Chicago's perfect family. My father, James Chen, built his fortune in pharmaceuticals, Chen Biotech. You've probably seen the name on medicine bottles. He appeared on magazine covers, gave talks at Harvard Business School, donated wings to hospitals with his name engraved in marble. The world saw a visionary, a self-made success story. I saw a man who measured his children's worth in profit margins. My mother, Catherine, came from old money and older bloodlines, doctors and lawyers going back 5 generations. She learned early that appearances were everything. That image mattered more than truth. She perfected the art of the camera-ready smile, the carefully scripted interview, the performance of maternal devotion. In her eyes, Madison was perfection itself. Beautiful, obedient, brilliant in all the right ways. Madison went to the right schools, dated the right people, chose the right career path. She graduated from Yale with honors in business management and stepped seamlessly into a position at the company. Every holiday card featured Madison front and center. Every press release mentioned her accomplishments. The walls of our home were shrines to her success. And then there was me. I still remember the first time I understood I was different. I was 8 years old, competing in my first science fair. I'd spent weeks building a water filtration system using sand, gravel, and activated charcoal. When they announced I'd won first place, I ran home with my blue ribbon clutched in my fist, bursting with pride. I found my parents in the living room, opening champagne. "I won!" I shouted, holding up my ribbon. "First place in the whole school!" My father glanced at it, then back to his phone. That's fine, Riley, but don't get distracted from what matters. My mother didn't even look up from adjusting Madison's recital dress. Maddie just got selected as the lead pianist for the city youth concert. We're celebrating real achievement. I stood there with my ribbon slowly drooping in my hand, feeling something inside me wither and die. That became the pattern. Madison excelled at everything society valued. She won debate tournaments, played tennis at the club, maintained perfect grades while somehow making it all look effortless. Every accomplishment earned parties, praise, and photo opportunities. I worked just as hard. I also got straight A's. I also won awards, but mine went into drawers and were forgotten. The breaking point came during my sophomore year of high school. I'd been selected as a finalist for the state environmental science competition. My project examined antibiotic contamination in local waterways, and I'd discovered genuinely concerning levels of pharmaceutical residue. My mother attended the awards ceremony, which was rare enough to fill me with desperate hope. When they called my name as the state champion, I looked to the audience with my heart in my throat. She was checking her phone. After the ceremony, as photographers took pictures of the winners, she finally approached me. I waited for the hug, the words of pride I'd been starving for. Instead, she leaned close and whispered, "You look completely disheveled, like a homeless person. This is embarrassing." The joy drained out of me like water through sand. That night, I understood a truth that would shape everything that came after. In my family, love was conditional. It was earned through obedience and conformity. Madison earned it by being exactly what they wanted. I lost it by being myself. My parents had my future mapped out with the precision of a military campaign. I would study pharmaceutical chemistry. I would join the company. I would work in the research division, supporting Madison's leadership, creating value for the family business. Any other dream was foolishness, but I loved the ocean. I loved marine ecosystems, coral reefs, the delicate balance of life beneath the surface. I wanted to study how human activity was destroying these systems and find ways to protect them. That's for people who write useless papers. My father said when I told him, "You need to do real work that matters to this family." When my acceptance letter from Northwestern's marine biology program arrived, he threatened to cut me off completely. "You'll get nothing from us," he said coldly. "Not tuition, not housing, nothing." I took out student loans. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I worked 3 jobs through college just to stay afloat, and I went anyway. For 4 years, I barely spoke to my parents. Occasional cold phone calls, obligatory appearances at major holidays where I was treated like a stranger who'd wandered into the wrong house. Madison tried to bridge the gap sometimes. She'd call to check on me, send care packages, invite me to family events. Part of me loved her for trying. Part of me resented her for never seeing how differently we were treated. She was the sun, and I was the shadow it cast. But there was one person who saw me. One person who made me believe I wasn't crazy for wanting something different. My grandmother, Riley Chen. While my parents built their empire on ruthless ambition, my grandmother was the family's hidden foundation. Decades before I was born, she'd been a pioneering chemist, one of the first women to earn a PhD in pharmaceutical chemistry from MIT. Her early research into pain management compounds became the basis for several breakthrough medications, including the very first drug that launched Chun Biotech. But you won't find her name in any company history. No plaques on walls, no mentions in press releases. My father erased her from the narrative because in his version of the story, he was the sole genius, the self-made man who needed no help from anyone, especially not from a woman. Grandmother Eleanor told me the truth one afternoon when I was 15. She took me down to her basement workshop, a space that smelled of old paper and possibility. From a wooden trunk, she pulled out stacks of research journals, formulas written in her elegant, confident handwriting. "These compounds," she said, running her fingers over the pages, "these were mine. I developed them, tested them, proved them viable. Your father took my work, filed the patents under his name, and built his fortune on research I gave him freely because he was my son. Why didn't you fight back?" I asked, my young heart burning with injustice. She smiled sadly. "Because in those days, people didn't believe women belonged in laboratories. They took what they wanted from us and called it progress." She paused, her eyes meeting mine with sudden intensity. "But you, Riley, you live in different times. Don't let anyone steal your work, your voice, your future. Don't become a footnote in someone else's story." Those words became my anchor. My parents dismissed my dreams when they called me selfish and ungrateful. I remembered my grandmother's quiet strength. What I didn't know then was that she'd prepared a gift for me, a secret that would change everything. She set up a trust fund in my name, $10 million that would be released when I graduated from college, not for luxury or status, but for freedom, for independence, for the power to build my own life, without bowing to anyone's expectations. She died when I was 17, but she left me a letter explaining everything. "This money is your escape, Riley," she wrote in her careful script. "Use it to be brave. Use it to tell the truth. Use it to build something that matters. Not to me or your parents, but to you. Promise me you won't let them control you the way they controlled me." I cried for hours after reading that letter. She'd believed in me when no one else did. She'd seen my worth when my own parents looked right through me. For 3 years, my parents knew nothing about the trust. It was managed by independent attorneys, kept completely separate from the company's finances. Then 3 months before my graduation, someone made a mistake. During a routine family financial review meeting, the company's senior attorney mentioned an independent trust account in passing. He assumed my parents already knew. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. After the meeting, I saw my father pull the attorney aside, his voice low and furious. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw the attorney's face go pale. That night, my father called me for the first time in 6 months. "Riley," he said, his voice warm in a way that made my skin crawl, "we need to talk about your future with the company. I think we've been too harsh. It's time to bring you into the fold." Every instinct screamed danger. From that moment, everything changed. My mother started calling regularly, asking about my favorite foods, what flowers I liked, whether I wanted a graduation party. My father sent congratulatory texts, something he'd never done in my entire life. They were planning something. I just didn't know what. The truth revealed itself during my final semester at Northwestern. I'd joined a research project studying water pollution in the Calumet River, a waterway running through Chicago's industrial zones. We were collecting samples, testing for contamination, documenting the impact of decades of industrial waste. The results were alarming. Mercury levels far above EPA standards, lead contamination, and something else? Traces of pharmaceutical compounds. That shouldn't exist in natural waterways. I recognized some of those compounds from my father's research journals. They were experimental drugs, never approved for public use, showing up in public water supplies. My heart sank as I traced the pollution upstream. It led directly to a Chun biotech facility on the west side of the river. For weeks I told myself it was a coincidence, some kind of mistake. Surely my father wouldn't knowingly dump toxic waste into public waterways. But the evidence kept mounting. I took samples from right outside the facility gates and found concentrations of an experimental compound called NBX47. I'd read about it in leaked internal documents, a potential pain medication that had been shelved after it caused severe cardiac issues in test animals. That compound should have been destroyed. Instead, it was flowing freely into the river. I thought about the communities downstream, the families drinking that water, cooking with it, bathing their children in it, the fishermen catching contaminated fish, the kids playing by the banks. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. "Don't let them steal your voice." I made copies of everything. Water samples, test results, photographs, GPS, coordinates. I stored them in 3 separate locations, including with my research advisor at the university. Then I did something that sealed my fate. I confronted my parents. It was a Tuesday evening, one of the rare occasions when we all sat down to dinner together. I spread the printed test results across the white tablecloth like cards in a game of poker. "I know what the company is doing," I said, my voice shaking but determined. "I have evidence. If you don't immediately stop the illegal dumping, I'm going to report it." The silence that followed was absolute. My father slowly set down his wine glass. My mother's hand froze halfway to her mouth. Only Madison looked shocked, her eyes wide with genuine confusion. "Riley," my father said finally, his voice soft and deadly, "you don't understand the complexities of what you're discussing. There are factors you're not aware of." "I understand poisoning people," I shot back. "I understand breaking federal environmental law. What part am I missing?" His eyes went cold as winter. "You're missing the part where this family survives because of loyalty? Because of silence?" "Silence isn't loyalty," I said. "It's cowardice." My mother's face hardened into a mask I'd never seen before. "You ungrateful child. After everything we've given you, you've given me nothing," I said quietly. "Except reasons to leave." I walked out that night knowing I'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I'd become a threat not just to my parents' pride, but to their empire, and I'd just inherited $10 million. They couldn't control. The dinner where they tried to poison me came 3 weeks later. Madison collapsed 11 minutes after drinking from my glass. The transformation was terrifying. One moment, she was laughing, radiant, accepting congratulations from guests. The next, she pressed a hand to her chest, her face draining of color. "I feel strange," she murmured, and then her legs buckled. The rooftop exploded into chaos. Screams, running footsteps, someone shouting for an ambulance. I pushed through the crowd and dropped to my knees beside my sister. Her skin was clammy with cold sweat. Her pulse raced erratically under my fingers. Her eyes rolled back, unseeing. "Madison," I shook her gently, my own heart hammering. "Stay with me." Amid the panic, I caught my mother's eye across the crowd. She stood frozen, her face a mask of pure terror. Not grief. Terror of being caught. The ambulance arrived in minutes. Paramedics swarmed around Madison with oxygen masks and monitoring equipment. "Possible cardiac event," one of them called out. Heart rate extremely elevated and irregular. I grabbed the lead paramedic's arm. "Listen to me carefully. This is likely poisoning from an experimental pharmaceutical compound. Designation MBX. It's a cyclopenicillin derivative that causes acute cardiac arrhythmia." The paramedic stared at me. "How do you? I'm a researcher. I know the symptoms. If you don't tell the ER doctors immediately, they'll waste critical time treating the wrong thing." He nodded sharply and relayed the information into his radio. As they loaded Madison onto the stretcher, I turned to face my parents. Guests had formed a confused, frightened semicircle around us. Some were filming on their phones. "That glass," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the silent rooftop, "was meant for me." My mother made a small, choked sound. My father's jaw clenched. "My father personally opened that bottle," I continued, gesturing to the table. "He personally poured that specific glass and set it in front of me. Everyone here saw it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People exchanged glances, uncertain. "Riley, stop this nonsense," my father said, his voice sharp with command. "Your sister simply had a reaction to what?" I interrupted. "To the experimental neurotoxin you put in my drink? The same compound your company has been illegally dumping in the Calumet River?" The murmurs grew louder. Several guests began backing toward the exits. A man in a suit pushed forward, flashing a badge. "Detective Morrison, Chicago PD. I'm going to need everyone to stay put." He'd been attending as a guest, I realized. Someone's +1, who happened to be a cop. Sometimes the universe has a sense of timing. At Northwestern Memorial Hospital, doctors worked frantically to stabilize Madison. I stood outside the ICU watching through glass walls as machines beeped and monitors spiked with dangerous rhythms. My best friend Emma found me there, still in her party dress, her face streaked with tea. "Riley, what's happening?" "Is Madison going to Sheila?" I said with more certainty than I felt. "Because I told them what poison to treat." Emma stared at me. "You knew? Before she drank it? It was meant for me. I told her everything." Then, the trust fund, the illegal dumping, the confrontation, my mother's hand slipping powder into my glass. Emma's face went through a dozen emotions, ending on something like awe mixed with horror. "You gave her your drink? You knew what was in it, and you gave it to your own sister." "I gave it to the daughter they actually love," I said quietly. "The one they'd move heaven and earth to save. If I'd drunk it, I'd be dead by morning, and they'd call it a tragic accident. But Madison," I gestured to the flurry of doctors, "they can't let her die. It would destroy them." "That's—" Emma struggled for words. "That's brilliant and terrifying. It's survival." A doctor emerged from the ICU pulling off latex gloves. "Are you family? I'm her sister." "She's stable now, but it was close. If we hadn't known to treat for NBX-47 poisoning, we'd have lost her." He paused. "How did you know what she'd been exposed to?" "Because I'm the one who discovered my family's company has been contaminating public water with it for months," I said. "And because that drink was meant for me." The doctor's eyes widened. He opened his mouth, then closed it, clearly unsure what to say to that. "You'll want to preserve blood samples," I continued. "The FBI is going to want them." True to prediction, federal agents arrived within hours. The media storm began before dawn. By the time the sun rose over Chicago, every major news outlet was running the story. Pharmaceutical heiress poisoned at graduation party. Chun Biotech. Executives accused of attempted murder, environmental crimes, and family betrayal in Chicago's elite. My phone exploded with calls from reporters, lawyers, and people I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly very interested in my well-being. I ignored them all, except one. The FBI agent who'd been assigned to the case. Ms. Chun, she said when we met. In a sterile conference room. We need your full cooperation. Everything you know about Chun Biotech's operations? I pulled out my laptop and opened encrypted files I'd been building for months. Water test results. Photographs of contaminated discharge pipes. Internal company documents I'd copied during a holiday visit. Financial records showing payments. To falsify EPA reports, the agent's eyes widened as she scrolled through page after page of evidence. You've been building a case, she said softly. I've been trying to survive, I corrected. The case is just a bonus. Within 48 hours, FBI agents raided Chun Biotech headquarters. They left with 17 boxers of documents for company computers and 6 employees who'd been ordered to destroy evidence. Within a week, an anonymous whistleblower from inside the company came forward. A senior chemist who'd been forced to alter safety data. He had copies of the real test results, documents showing that executives, including my father, had ordered him to hide evidence of toxic side effects. The scandal metastasized. Environmental contamination, falsified drug trials, attempted murder. Each revelation worse than the last. My parents were arrested on a Wednesday morning. I watched it on the news like everyone else, seeing my father led out of his office building, in handcuffs, my mother being loaded into a police car outside our family home. They'd dressed carefully that morning. I noticed. Professional, dignified, still playing their roles, but their faces told the real story. Pale, defeated, terrified. The trial began 9 months later. Federal courthouse, downtown Chicago. The media circus was relentless. Cameras everywhere, reporters shouting questions, protesters with signs demanding justice. I walked into that courthouse with my head high, wearing a navy suit my grandmother would have approved of. Simple, professional, unafraid. My parents sat at the defense table in expensive suits that no longer looked powerful, just desperate. Their attorney, a man who'd spent 30 years protecting the family, stood with them, looking like he'd aged a decade. The prosecution called me first. I walked to the witness stand with steady steps, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. The whole truth. Nothing but the truth. And I did. I told them about the trust fund, the illegal dumping, my grandmother's stolen research. I presented the water test results, the photographs, the documents. I walked them through the night of the party, moment by moment. My mother put poison in my drink, I said clearly. I watched her do it. She thought I wasn't paying attention, but I was. I've spent my whole life paying attention to the ways they wished I didn't exist. The defense attorney objected, claiming hearsay and bias. The judge overruled him. Then they called Madison to the stand. My sister had spent months recovering, both physically and emotionally. The poison had damaged her heart, requiring surgery and extensive rehabilitation. But worse than the physical? Scars were the psychological ones. The knowledge that our parents had been willing to let her die to silence me? She walked to the witness stand slowly, her hand trembling as she took the oath. Tell us what happened that night, the prosecutor said gently. Madison's voice shook, but held. Riley gave me her drink. She said I deserved to share the moment with her. I thought it was sweet. I thought she was finally accepting me as her sister. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Within minutes, I couldn't breathe. My heart was beating so fast I thought it would explode. I remember thinking I was going to die at my own sister's graduation party. Did you know the drink contained poison? Not until I woke up in the hospital and the doctors told me. Who poured that drink? Madison's voice broke. Our father. He opened the bottle himself. He poured it himself. He said it directly in front of Riley. In the gallery, my mother made a small, desperate sound. The evidence was overwhelming. The video Emma had recorded showed my mother's hand moving over the glass. Toxicology reports confirmed NBX-47 in Madison's system. The whistleblower's testimony detailed years of criminal activity. Environmental agencies presented documentation of contaminated water sources, and through it all, my parents sat silent. Their attorney tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, an accident, a frame-up by a vengeful daughter, but the jury saw through it. After 3 weeks of testimony, they deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge read the verdict with a voice like granite. Conspiracy to commit murder, Corporate fraud, environmental crimes, falsification of federal documents? My father's face went gray. My mother simply closed her eyes. The defendants are sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. The judge continued. All personal and corporate assets are frozen pending restitution. Chun Biotech is hereby placed under receivership pending dissolution. The gavel came down like a final period on a sentence dot in the gallery. I sat perfectly still. I didn't cheer, didn't cry, just absorbed the weight of what had just happened. The empire was gone, the perfect family revealed as a lie. The truth, finally, in the light. Emma squeezed my hand. It's over, she whispered. No, I said quietly. It's beginning. After the trial, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I moved into my grandmother's house, the old Victorian by the lake, the one with the basement workshop and the garden running wild. It needed work, needed care, needed someone to breathe life back into its bones. Madison came with me. My sister had nowhere else to go. Our family home was seized, our parents' assets frozen. She'd lost her job at the company, her social circle, everything she'd built her identity on. One evening, as we unpacked boxers in what would become her room, she turned to me with tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she said, for everything, for not seeing how they treated you, for taking their side, for being blind. I set down the box I was holding and looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't the golden child anymore, just a woman who'd had her worldview shattered, trying to pick up the pieces. You were their favorite, I said, not their accomplice. There's a difference. I should have protected you. You were protecting yourself. That's what we all do in toxic families. We survive however we can. Madison wiped her eyes. I don't know who I am without them. Without the company, the expectations, the plan they had for me. Neither did I admitted. But that's the gift, isn't it? Getting to find out. She gave a watery laugh. Some gift. But slowly, carefully, we built something new. Not the perfect sisterhood of greeting cards, but something real. We had coffee. Together, in the mornings, argued about everything from politics to which streaming service to subscribe to, learned each other's rhythms and boundaries. Madison applied to law school that fall. Environmental law. I want to fix what they broke, she told me. I want to protect people from companies like ours. Like theirs, she corrected. It's not ours anymore. I smiled. That's the first step, separating yourself from their crimes. What? About you? She asked. What's your first step? I'd been thinking about that. The trust fund had been released to me after the trial, minus the portions seized for restitution to contaminated communities. I still had more money than I'd ever need. But money wasn't freedom. It was just a tool. I'm starting a foundation, I said, for communities harmed by corporate environmental crimes. Medical care, legal support, water remediation, real help, not just press releases and charity gals. Madison nodded slowly. Can I help? You're going to law school. That's helping. After law school, then. When I'm actually useful, you're useful now, I said. You're here. That matters. The Community Justice Initiative launched 6 months after the trial. We hired environmental scientists, public health experts, and community organizers. We funded water testing, medical screenings, and legal advocacy. The first community we helped was the one along the Calumet River. The families who'd been drinking contaminated water for years because of my father's company. I met with them personally, sat in community centers and listened to stories of children with mysterious illnesses, fishermen who could no longer eat their catch, gardens that produced stunted, dying vegetables. Why should we trust you? One woman asked, her arms crossed. Your name is Chun. Your family did this to us.